In a sleek office tower lobby, a security chief orders a dishwasher to strip off his shoes and empty his backpack in front of a crowd after a watch goes missing. The building coordinator steps in, blocks the scene with stanchions, moves the search to a private room, and gets suspended for interfering. Her quiet care reveals the man's urgent court date, and the aftermath reshapes everyday routines in small, lasting ways. Before we get started, tap like, share, and subscribe to join the journey. And tell me, where in the world are you watching? Drop your country below. I love seeing the global trail of these stories. The plastic bus tub hit the marble with a slap. Forks lunged out of the overturned bin, skittering in rings of soup and water. A backpack thudded down beside a pair of rubber-soled clogs. People slowed. Phone cameras lifted a few inches, then lowered. The man in the wet apron kept his hands up, palms empty. Shoes, the security chief said. Palm open. Shoes, backpack, pockets. He had a radio at his shoulder and a sheen of sweat at his temples. We had a watch go missing from 38. Open the bag right here. He glanced up to the mezzanine, to the glass where executives watched the lobby like a fish tank, and back down at the man. Let's go. Mara watched from the concierge desk with her radio at her hip. She took in the clotted soup sliding toward the elevator, the rubber gloves stuffed in a back pocket, the tightness in the dishwasher's jaw. She saw the black stanchions coiled with red belts around the espresso kiosk. She saw Mr. Chen 2 floors up, talking into two phones at once. Building policy said no public searches. It also said security trumped operations, and that interfering meant a write-up. Her rent was due on Friday. The man tugged his apron strap like it was a seatbelt. He shook his head when the security chief repeated himself. I didn't, he said, but it came out thin. He started unlacing one shoe. A few office workers looked away, suddenly fascinated by the art on the wall. A woman in a white blazer held her coffee and didn't move. She slid the stanchion belt out with a soft click and blocked the view. She dragged another belt across, making a quick square. Private room, she said, not raising her voice. Now. She stepped between the chief and the man and closed the man's fist around the backpack zipper. Mara, the chief said, like her name tasted bad. Don't do this. She met his eyes. Policy 4.12, she said. Bag checks happen in private with a third party present. She thumbed her badge and opened the small conference room off the lobby. We're going in there. You can radio your supervisor. I'll call HR. He doesn't need an audience. It's my call, he said. He wasn't yelling. He looked tired. He looked like a man who had been asked again to make a mess disappear. The radio at his shoulder chirped twice. He glanced up at the glass again. The woman in the white blazer was now on her phone, watching them. I'll sit in, Mara said. If anything is missing, charge it to my cost center until we figure it out. She heard herself say it and felt her stomach drop. She guided the man toward the conference room with a flat hand in the air, like spotting a stranger stepping off a curb. Please, she said to him softer. He went. He didn't look at her. People around them pulled back the way a tide does when something heavy moves under it. Someone muttered about lateness. Another person set their coffee down very carefully and stared at the foam design like it held answers. In the glass-walled room, Mara pulled the blind slats shut, one by one. The man sat and pulled his shoes off slowly. He moved like everything weighed double. She turned on the table lamp because the overhead light hummed. She dialed HR from her own phone and put it on speaker. Lobby conference, she said. Bag check in progress. Requesting rep. The security chief stood in the doorway with his radio cupped to his ear. He paced once, then twice. My supervisor's on his way, he said. He looked at Mara's hand on the table. This isn't personal, I know, she said, even though it was. She knelt and picked up two forks that had hitched a ride on the man's pant leg. She set them on a napkin. She dropped another napkin over the soup stain that had made its way in on the sole of his shoe. He slid the backpack toward her, then stopped and put his hand back on it, like he needed to feel it there. Hand me your radio, Mara. Mr. Sedwer, Mara, Mr. Sapil, Mara, Mr. Sapir. Chen had arrived without footsteps, without voice. He just appeared in the reflection on the glass. He was already reaching out. You're off the floor. She unclipped the radio. It tumbled in her hand before she caught it and set it in his palm. After we're done here, she said. Not a question. You're done now, he said. His tie was perfect. There was a red dot on his chin from a missed shaving swipe. Interfering with security is a violation. His eyes went to the man's backpack, then to the man's face. We will handle this. You can write me up after, she said. You can suspend me after. Right now, you're going to let him do this with a door and a rep. She felt her lips start to shake and pressed it flat with her teeth. She looked at the man's hands. They were clean, pink, at the knuckles from hot water. Mr. Chen let out a breath through his nose. 5 minutes, he said, and stepped back into the lobby, likely because people were still watching and phones still hovered. The union rep answered on the second try. On my way, a woman's voice said, clipped and steady. Don't let them isolate him. Mara poured water into a paper cone cup from the carafe in the corner. In the break room that smelled like bleach and coffee, she set a paper cup in front of him. It shivered a little in her hand. He took it without looking up and sipped. His shoes were off. His socks had a small hole near the big toe. He tucked the hole under his foot, like he'd done it before. I didn't take anything, he said, voice low. She nodded. Not agreement, not disagreement. Just a yes to hearing him. The security chief took 2 latex gloves from the box on the shelf. He paused. You doing this or me? He asked the man. Not unkindly. I'll do it, the man said. He opened the backpack slowly, like it might jump. He took out a sandwich in wax paper, a folded hoodie, a plastic container with rice stuck to the lid, a bus pass on a lanyard, a small plastic case with an inhaler, a screwdriver with tape around the handle. When he opened the backpack to put everything back, a paper slipped out. It drifted like a small white fish until it hit the carpet. Mara picked it up and didn't mean to read it, but her eyes caught the bold print because bold print is meant to be caught. Family court, it said. Below that, a date. Today, 3:00 p.m., there was a line that said failure to appear may result in default. She put the paper back on the table and slid her hand away. The man's throat moved as he swallowed. This whole thing is because of a watch, the security chief said into his radio. He read off the man's name from his badge softly, as if tasting the sound of it for the first time. We're trying to close the loop. His voice had a tightness at the end like a lid that didn't want to fit. A knock at the door. The union rep slid in, her hair in a bun and a stack of forms in her hand. She placed herself at the end of the table and nodded once at the man, once at Mara, once at the chief. Proceed, she said. He laid everything out. He shook each item once so the sound was clear. Clack for the inhaler, soft thud for the sandwich, whisper for the hoodie. The chief patted the bag. He turned the main pocket inside out and shook it. A few grains of rice fell like salt. That was it. The man stood with his palms up again, as if there were only 2 things in the world and both of them were these hands. We're going upstairs, the chief said finally into his radio, voice flat. Nothing down here. He snapped off the gloves and balled them in his fist. His eyes went to the man's socks again, the small hole. He looked like he wanted to be somewhere else, anywhere else, but here was where the job was. Watch was last seen conference room B on 38, the union rep said, reading from her form like it was a recipe. Maybe start there. Her tone wasn't biting. It was bored. Bored was sometimes the strongest thing in the room. Mr. said. Chen hovered in the doorway. Give me your badge, he said to Mara. His voice had no texture now. She unclipped it. Her neck felt suddenly lighter. We'll call you. He walked away before she could nod. She stayed. She shouldn't have. But she did. She bought a new pair of socks from the convenience store in the building and slid them across the table. Size? She asked. 10. He nodded without meeting her eyes. He pulled them on, and then his shoes. She cut the plastic from a cable tie and used it to stitch the frayed backpack strap back to its clip. The strap held. Thank you, he murmured, like words might break the room. You got somewhere to be at 3, she said, and he flinched like he'd been caught. She kept her voice plain. You'll make it. She checked the clock. Plenty of time if he left on schedule. She slid a transit card across too, $15 on it. She didn't say it out loud. He looked at it and then away. An hour later, someone from 38 brought down a stainless steel watch in a to-go napkin. Found under a folder, she said, cheeks red. She set it on the security desk like it was radioactive and left. No one clapped. The security chief didn't look at Mara. He didn't look at anyone. He wrote something in a logbook and closed it with a soft thud. The man stood, fixed the strap of his backpack on his shoulder, and nodded at Mara. He didn't smile. He didn't need to. He pressed the court paper flat with his palm, folded it twice, and slid it back into the bag. He walked to the elevator with a slight limp from the hole in his sock that wasn't there anymore. The doors opened. He stepped in without looking up at the glass wall where people stood and pretended they weren't watching. They suspended her for 3 days. She went home, cleaned the grout in her shower with a toothbrush, and tried not to check her email. It was early spring. Rain hit the window in a thin, steady line. She wondered if the man had made it to court. She wondered what part of the day would stick with him, the soup on the marble or the cheap socks. She hoped it would be neither. Over the next weeks, small things shifted. A blue privacy screen appeared in the lobby, the kind on wheels that hospitals use, with magnets that snap together with a satisfying click. A new sign by security read, "Bag checks occur in private with a third party present." The union rep's number was taped next to the phone in the dish room. Someone moved the extra socks from the convenience store to the shelf above the mop sink where anyone could take them. The security chief started saying, "Sir and ma'am, more." No one made him. He just did. He lowered his radio volume. He started keeping the latex gloves in his pocket instead of waving them around. Once, he held the door for the man with the backpack and nodded first. On 38, the conference room got a small tray for watches and phones right by the door. A sticky note above it said, "Check here." The note had a smiley face. It was corny. It worked. The woman in the white blazer left a bakery box at the dish window one day with a card that said, "Thanks, from 38th." The handwriting was messy. The card didn't make a noise when the man read it and set it down. Mara came back and signed her coaching form without pushing for edits. She didn't make a speech. HR gave her badge back across the table. She clipped it on and felt exactly the same as she had before, and also a little different. The blue screen, which she had suggested in a too-long email last year, sat folded against the wall like a beach chair. She reached out and tested the magnets. They snapped like knuckles. Good. She wheeled it once, just to see how it turned. She relearned the building in small ways. Where the sun fell at 10, where the floor dips near the mailroom, where people will stop when a sound makes them. She watched people ignore and then not. She watched them watch the dishwashers leave, and then she watched them step to the side and make space. That morning, light from the atrium hit the wet floor in a bright rectangle. Mara stood at the edge of it, listening to the distant whir of an elevator, the clink of cups, the slide of wheels. She caught herself in the glass and looked away. The man with the backpack walked past, the strap held by a cable tie that caught the light like a tiny piece of tin. He nodded at her once. Small. She pressed the palm of her hand to the cool top of the privacy screen and felt the magnet settle into place with that clean, quiet click.